It was a very big reminder about how things like this, whether it's having a stroke or having high blood pressure, that forces you to reevaluate. Like, I was lucky. I realized how lucky I was in that moment because I was able to say, hey, enough.
In this episode of Investors and Operators, I am talking with Kim Smith. We've known each other for a couple of years. She is the Chief Capital Formation Officer at Andalusian Credit Partners, but we have known each other for a few years. And Kim has probably one of the more interesting stories out of all the podcast guests that we've had. Kim, before I go into some of the interesting stories, can you just kind of give an overview of what you do?
Well, that's quite an introduction. Thanks, Jordan. I raise capital. I raise capital. I help firms raise capital to grow their businesses. And then I also think about what other avenues one can do to continue to that growth, whether it's new funds, new businesses, add-on products. So I'll work with teams to work from a strategy perspective, but mainly with the sole goal: how do we build a business? And how do you build a business? Money.
Now, I know you've been exposed. I mean, you were at Owl Creek for what, 10 plus, 10, 15
16
years,
years, yes.
16 years raising money for them. You've done your own personal investments in the venture space
Yes.
and recently joined Andalusian Credit with an amazing team. So you've kind of been across a variety of asset classes. I mean, first off, what does Andalusian Credit Partners do?
We are a direct lending firm, primarily focusing on a few key verticals: sports, media, entertainment, and financial sector. And so we are pretty differentiated from a lot of other middle market direct lenders that you see in the market. We're not the only private credit fund, but we are one that really has a disciplined approach to investing in areas that we know well, which are sports, media and entertainment, and financial sector.
Well, now we've kind of given the context on what you're doing and kind of the professional side. Let's rewind a lot and
Okay.
let's go back to, where you grow up and what the story is.
I'm an uptown girl, as Billy Joel would say. I grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. My father, and how you and I really came together, my father was a career military man, served in Vietnam, spent 30 plus years in the Air Force. My mother was a school principal here in New York City in public schools. But I really grew up in a family that was super focused on education, and we would spend, or they would spend, most of their money to send me to school. So we didn't have any fancy vacations, and we didn't have any, 3 homes. But what my parents were singularly focused on in education, and we saw that because they benefited so much from education. My father, as you know, grew up very impoverished in upstate New York, and really had the opportunity of a lifetime to leave Poughkeepsie. This is Poughkeepsie pre-IBM, pre-Pepsi, pre what it is today. But to leave Poughkeepsie and go to Howard because of education. And he saw that as an opportunity for him to advance. He ultimately became a dentist, and they really valued that for me. My mom too. My mom is one of 3 sisters. She was the only one that had the opportunity to go to college. And for both of them, it was a calculus by their parents, really. They were the lucky ones within their family because they were the ones that their family felt, not just their parents, but collectively their siblings as well, that they were going to put their eggs in that basket for their success. And so when they had me, and I'm an only child, they kind of had that same dream for me, except all their energy was focused on me.
What was what was the story again with your dad leaving Poughkeepsie? I forget the
Yeah,
details.
so my father was the first Black president of Arlington High School in Poughkeepsie, and he had He was super popular. He was just a funny, really funny man that, quite frankly, he really did transcend race if you talk to his friends. But he played sports, he played competitive baseball, but he had the opportunity to go to Howard University. And even at the time, it wasn't, regardless of race, like a lot of people from lower to middle incomes really didn't go to college. I mean, it was a luxury then. I mean, right now you're seeing so many people going to college. You see people saying people have to stop going to college. But at that point, most people didn't go. It was really the upper echelon that went to the schools. And so he had the opportunity to go to Howard on a full ride. And his mother, my grandmother, who was completely illiterate, worked as a domestic worker from the time she was a teenager. And she gave my father $20 and a bus ticket to Washington, D.C. And her words to him were, "Don't ever come back." And she looked him in the eye, and they were very close. And he said, "Why?" So, "There's nothing for you here. Don't ever come back. You can come to visit, but don't ever promise me you'll never come back to Poughkeepsie to live." And he didn't. And he came back, and he was very close with his mother. But it was the opportunity, and that was probably he always said that was the heaviest $20 that he ever had in his life, because there was so much riding on it. That meant probably his brothers didn't eat, or they ate very simply. They had to sacrifice. Everybody sacrificed to put him on that bus that day. And that stayed with him. And it was a blessing and a curse in many respects, more of a blessing than a curse, but he always say, that's a really heavy $20 bill. And it really, I think he really wished he could have kept that $20. You know, you see in a Greek restaurant, you go to a diner, they say the first dollar.
Yeah.
He wished he could have kept that money, but he couldn't. Obviously, he needed it to survive, and it wasn't easy of a transition for him.
How did that shape you in your upbringing?
You know, for me, as you know, I'm super philanthropic, and I grew up in a home where if we had more than somebody else, we'd split the difference with them. And I really hope I continue to impart that on my children today. But it really, to me, showed the importance of giving back and giving people opportunities that they may not have been able to get because I am fortunate. And those opportunities aren't all, people think all of those are money driven, but they're not. They're taking kids to the opera, taking people to the Central Park, delivering food, you know, those micro gestures that you can impart to people on a daily basis are so important. And that was something my parents really imparted with me. That was like one of the biggest pieces of wisdom. But the other thing I always think about this, and this isn't a unique saying that my father coined, but he always tried to share a smile. And that's the corniest thing I probably have ever said. But he always said, if I see someone that's looking dour and angry, he's like, I try to smile at them and see if that small gesture might make a difference in their day. And it's something I try to think about myself when I'm having a tough day and I'm walking down the street or I'm on the subway and I'm trying to fight people for a seat. And I think, okay, wait, I'm blessed. I have 2 healthy children. I have a great husband. My mother is still alive at 94 years old. I have so many blessings in my life. And I try to think about, okay, I'm going to give someone a smile. Now, sometimes people are like, who's this crazy person in New York City smiling at me? But it's those micro gestures. It's those little things. It's the heavy $20. It's the bus ticket that changes people's lives. Like, I'll never forget that. And I think similar to my father, in some ways it was a blessing, right? He was able to live a place where he didn't have a bathroom in his home. I mean, it's hard for us to think about that, but the only time my father as a child went to the bathroom in a building was at school. When he came home, he had an outhouse that he had to go to the bathroom in. And he never had any resentment. He would tell these stories with a smile, with flourish, like how lucky he was. But it also, for me, from an early age, definitely made it put a lot of pressure on me. So all the blessings he had from that $20, being able to go to Howard, being able to go to the Air Force, being able to go back and go to medical school, become an oral surgeon, be able to send me to private school and to a top college. I felt, and he never did this, but I felt, wow, he went from this poverty in upstate New York to being able, in a time of segregation, of rampant racism, and terrible prosecution of Black people in general. Like, this was really almost like pre-civil rights movement type era, and be able to do all this and always have a smile on his face was a blessing, but also a curse. Like, okay, wait, I've been handed all these things.
Yeah.
Now what? What can I
Don't
do?
mess it up, Kim.
Yeah, don't bleep it up. Is essentially, that should be the title of this podcast. Don't bleep it up, Kim.
Well, I think there are some really interesting takeaways. And one of the things it reminds me of is actually how my wife and co-CEO Jing grew up. Like, there was a time when she lived in an apartment building that had one bathroom, one kitchen, like for that entire floor. And it was just such a different upbringing. And it was just, understanding and always keeping perspective of people have different experiences, and that it's an obligation I feel an obligation to give to others, which is why I spend 5 to 10 hours a week with transitioning veterans. We don't have the money just to write that 5K check, that 10K check. We're not there in life yet, but we can donate our time. And hey, I've been thinking hard about this since 2017, when it even got to the point when in December 2018, Jing said, "You care more about veterans than you do about the family." Because I was giving so much time to that, because it was fulfilling. And it also was really difficult in the startup that I was running at the same time. But what that first 2 years taught me is, like, I don't have to wait till I'm retired to give. I can give in my own way with what we have. And it has to be part of our weekly existence, because I just don't like that. There is this philosophy of, like, learn, earn, and return. And some people say go in that order, but I'm like, you can return as you're earning. Just have to wait till you're retired to have that 10 hours a week to do coffee chats, to do introductions. And maybe if I have some cash on the side, like, yeah, we have donated, but it's mainly remembering how important it is to carve out time during the week on a consistent basis to give. And I'll tell you, like, when this business and the previous business got really, really hard, doing that giving just kept balance in the force.
To me, I mean, first of all, what you do for veterans is amazing. And I will say, speaking to a number of them myself, because as you know, I'm also very passionate about helping our veterans succeed post-military service. But I will tell you, everyone I've spoken with, the time that you give them is probably actually more valuable than money. And it is so funny you bring it up today, because I had this conversation with a gentleman who's super philanthropic. And we talked about how so much philanthropy is more than money. It is about the time. Writing a check is easy. Jordan, what you do and the time you spent with veterans, that's hard stuff, right? You and I had a vet I don't know, it was a year or so ago, that really struggled mentally from what they went through when they were deployed. And having to speak with them and spend time and be their therapist coach is way more valuable to them than us giving them $5,000. And so
And I think it's
I
also,
couldn't agree with you more.
and I think it's also more meaningful for the industry professional that they want to develop that personal relationship with that vet who is transitioning and be a part of their life. And
Correct.
not just, yes, the money helps them get to New York to do a 2-day event, or, helps to sponsor an interview trip to San Francisco for 5 interviews in 2 days. But like, what's more impactful is actually having that personal relationship that's formed between our mentors and the transitioning vets. But it was just a reminder of like, no matter how hard it gets in business, and with the first startup, and then this business, which just hit our 5-year anniversary this month, it's just like, no matter how hard it gets with that, no matter how hard it gets with the family, like, there always is a place to give. And some weeks might be a week. Some weeks it might be an hour. Weeks it might be an all-day board meeting. But no matter what, there's always time to give. And
No question.
the other thing, which was interesting, is like, actually, I forgot my thought because I went off on that tangent. But when you think about your mom, like, how did she impact you?
In so many ways, because I think a lot of times people focus on the experiences of their fathers, not just me, but a lot of people. Fathers seem to be larger than life for many people. And my father is my best friend, but so is my mom. And and probably from a personality standpoint, I'm much more like my father, more of an introvert, more jokey, always trying to diffuse a situation. But my
I'm
mom
sorry, there
is
is an interruption with the Wi-Fi. Did you say you're an introvert?
no, an extrovert.
Oh,
Did I say introvert? Oh, sorry.
I was like, wait a second.
No, I'm more of an extrovert, like similar to my father. My mom is an introvert. Even at 94, she probably reads 3, 4 newspapers a day and is always on top of things. We always laugh. Like, did you see XYZ player got traded? We're like, you've never watched a football game in your life. But what I learned from her is if you say start atop of the news, you'll always be able to have a conversation with anybody. And I do think that is her secret weapon. My mom grew up in probably a little bit more financially secure household than my father. She grew up here in New York City, went on to Hunter, and ended up getting a master's in education. At the time, she was top of her class. My mom was really, really smart. And she said she remembers this very clearly. And she probably was like in her 20s. And she went to what now would probably be in a college counselor and someone that helps you get jobs after you graduate. And she said, okay, I have this master's. I did all my time at school. I'd like to get into business. And they're like, what? You have 2 paths. You can be a secretary or a teacher before you get married. And she's like, I have a master's degree. Was top of my class. And they're like, yeah, you could be a secretary or a teacher. And she wanted to pursue a more professional path. And so she ended up getting into teaching and then ultimately became an administrator and spent, most of her career as a principal. And I think about that now. We see a lot of women that are C-suite executives that are CEO of Fortune 500 companies, but like really on the backs of many women like my mom that in the 50s went and got not only a college degree, a master's degree, and then were presented with negative opportunities. And the only professional path she really had an option for as a woman, as a Black woman, was to become a teacher. And that was it. And she was never resentful about it. I mean, I will say both of my parents took the opportunities that presented them. I think that they were really very good about navigating those opportunities and being able to elevate themselves into better positions, not in a political or calculating way, but they always wanted more. They definitely wanted to provide me with anything I ever wanted, and I never wanted for anything. We may not have been rich financially, but we were rich in love and opportunities and anything else that a girl could desire. But my parents were really good at kind of being able to present themselves in a place that helped them get to maybe what would say the top of their game in very limited areas of growth.
Mm. And I think that points to the need to, for people to share their story, because people need role models. And a role model does not have to be your every other week at 4 p.m. on a Friday, you speak with your mentor. They're by other people who are successful in a variety of different definitions. Telling that story just exposes people to what is possible. And I think, especially now when getting access to information is at their fingertips, anybody can access it. That's even more reason for people who are successful, maybe financially in their career, to share that story so that people can be exposed to it.
Yeah, and I think in some ways the access, the what's the word I'm looking for? We're always bombarded with information. And I'm intellectually curious. I will click on that link and try to figure out and machinate how do you do XYZ. But the pros and cons of always having access to information is ultimately, I do think it makes one complacent. And my parents, as people of color in a really challenging 50, 60 changing dynamic in the United States, and having no access to information, in fact, quite the opposite. People were withholding information from them. And they were able to leverage it by reading, by staying in front of people, by being nice to people. They were able to excel. And maybe that isn't a career path maybe people want to take. And that's fine, but like they did the best of what they had. And they looked, and they would, well, kind of circling back full circle to what you and I started to talk about. They definitely were helped by others. And that is why they instilled in me helping other people. And I'll give you a crazy example. Well, it's going to seem crazy, but my father was relocated. As you know, for military, you stay at these bases 2 or 3 years. So he was in New York, and actually New Jersey, had his dental license, but they moved into Massachusetts. So he needed to get a new dental license. And no one would help him. They were like, no, we're not, you people can't get dental licenses here. And he had to go to different places. And this one woman said, no, that's not how, you are a qualified dentist. I'm going to make sure you're going to get your dental license. And I'm going to stay with you the entire time of the test so they don't do anything nefarious. And this woman, who did not know my father at all, said, I'm not going to let these people close you out because of the color of your skin. And she stayed with him the entire time that he took his test, so no one would bother him. And that seems like but he would have lost his job if he hadn't gotten it. He would not have been able to practice in Massachusetts had he not had this savior, this woman who just spent probably 2-3 hours with a man she didn't know, just because she knew it was the right thing to do. And that's what we need to really, I think, instill in people today. Small things can end up really being life altering.
I believe one of the key takeaways from this episode is the importance of being there on a consistent basis for other people.
For sure.
Now, whether it is, regardless of the cause, and it could literally just be a text every other week to check in with that transitioning veteran or whatever cause you care about, but on a consistent basis. And particularly for what I've been exposed to around transitioning veterans, I had a pretty powerful experience recently where sat down with one of our members, and this is someone who has been very successful post transition and making a very good amount of money. And they recently shared that they're in a dark place, in a very, very dark place when they didn't know if they wanted to continue in life. And it hit me hard because by every metric of success post transition, they were successful. And it made me realize how important 51 Vets is and the need for the members to stay connected, the need for mentors to stay connected with our members, and actually with each other, regardless, like veteran or not. Just people go through shitty times in life, and you need to check in with each other.
Oh,
And
for sure.
that's one of the things I've learned. And even with Jing and I in this entrepreneurial journey since 2016, the first business, all the money going out. And then like, oh, I have screenshots of the Chase bank account. Like I have screenshots of the previous business, like overdraft, and like did not know what was going to happen. We're going to lose the apartment. I mean, it got to a point we had our 4-month, our 18-month-old at the time, we sent her to live with the grandparents in China. Didn't have the money. And we had to focus on the business. And
Yeah.
Jing was carrying the family being a lawyer. And I'm going through that experience like, holy shit, my bad dad, my bad husband. Like I was doing investment banking before. How did I get it? How did I get here? We live in 450 square feet. Like what happened? And then like been through those dark places. So I think it's a message of being there for other people. So I'm curious like what maybe you've experienced in just kind of the ups and downs of career and maybe kind of how you navigated that.
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head though about checking in on others, even if they're not your best friends. It's always important to have that connectivity. I mean, I definitely, as you know, really feel that for our veterans. One of the things, it's on my website, so I'll quote it, but a lot of the veterans I'll speak with will say the war began when I got home, because they didn't have the network anymore, the camaraderie of sitting around, whether it's the barracks or sitting around, the mess room, whatever it is, you lose that. And in some ways you lose that after college a little bit when everybody's going on their own. I mean, I had a similar, I don't want to say it's a similar situation to my mom and others, but I remember graduating from Middlebury, at the time, top 10 best liberal arts school in the world, in the country. I did well. And I had initially wanted to go into politics, and I had a job offer with my local congressman, and I was kind of got disillusioned with politics and how I could be impactful, and how I didn't feel like, in some ways it sounds so crazy, but I didn't feel like I could be as frontline enough working in a political office as I could externally. I didn't know how to articulate that, but as you know, I just definitely like to do frontline work, whether it's delivering food or reading, whatever it is. But when I tried to transition from this political lobbyist road that I started to undertake really in high school, I mean, I was very into politics in high school. And then when I wanted to kind of transition to something new and I ended up getting into finance, it was really hard for me. And like, I'm smart. I have a degree in economics. Like, I should be an analyst. I couldn't get an analyst job. I had to start as an assistant myself. And really, and in fact, I feel like I was not even that. I was a jack of all trades, master of none. I entered trades. I fixed telephones. I whatever they wanted, because I actually started a startup. I mean, it was a very well-funded startup, but it was a startup nonetheless from a business building perspective. And so I kind of came into this job of this kind of master, jack of all trades, master of none. And having every single job. And I kind of had that almost at every single job. I must be attracted to that, but I've almost had that at every single job I've had. But in my head, I couldn't understand why all these dopey friends of mine that were, peeing in a cup in a fraternity were getting jobs at Goldman Sachs as an analyst, and I couldn't get a job. I'm like, I did better than them. And I minored in bio on top of it. And they were definitely far exceeding me, not just financially, but career wise. And they had real paths. And ultimately, I think not having a path was my path.
God, I wish I could tell my younger self it's going to be all right. Because when you start off, it's really hard to understand how all of the dots connect afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I look at what I do now, I do marketing for private equity. I had zero marketing background, but I did 6 years of investment banking. I started a failed debt financing startup that taught me how to do marketing. And now that's all combining into what has become a niche in a very specific market that I only got exposure to because I did investment banking and then the debt financing startup. And if you told me in college, like, hey, you're going to run a marketing firm that focuses on private equity, hedge funds, investment banks, I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And it didn't, and it only happened because we failed at the last business, but we learned how to do marketing. And then when Jing said, hey, I'm tired of carrying you, you need to find a way to pay bills, I hit up a private equity firm. I was like, can I do LinkedIn for you? They're like, what is that? I was like, let me show you. And then that led to one thing after another, but I couldn't have seen how that came together. And now this is year 5. I'm like, God, I wish I could tell the story to the 22-year-old who is anxious, depressed. You got a 2.79 GPA. You didn't get into consulting. You had to go do software sales coming out of UNC Chapel Hill. And it's like, and so much wandering in the career.
It's so much. But I think, to me, all the rejection made me stronger.
Yep.
And I think that's how we've been able to evolve. And quite frankly, I think that's why you and I have this share bond, not just on veterans, but helping people. Because when we needed it, there was someone there that gave us a hand and to help us pull us up. And we're always there to help somebody else and pull them up. And I think it's because of our journey. And I think, when things are easy, and to me, that's like the biggest thing I want to sell. I want to tell my children 2 things. One, what you just said, it's going to be okay. All of this is inconsequential. And then 2, challenge yourself, fail and 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 fail. Fail again.
Well, it's the journey of a misfit.
For sure.
And eventually
things are given to you. It's the worst option of them all.
We've been thinking about how to do that with our 4 and 7-year-old now, of how do you teach these basic principles of earning something. And that little Buzz Lightyear toy outside, you had to earn that. And so we're trying to figure out these basic principles as opposed to, just giving them everything and just hit the easy button, go to Costco. Here's the Legos. Okay, cool. Like, there's 2 hours on a Saturday. Give me some breathing room.
I think it's hard because, similar to we're bombarded with information. We're bombarded with things, whether it's on social media, Instagram, whatever it is, even emails. Even if you're not on social media, you're still bombarded with information. Our kids are bombarded with things, right? With toys, with books, with TV, with everything. And we've become kind of a country of A, of consumerism, but B, of just one to a next, and then we do one thing, okay, next, off the list. Like, you were so programmed to have be to-do list people. And listen, I have manifests of to-do lists. Like, trust me, I do too. But if you don't just focus on one thing at a time, whatever it is, you're never going to successfulully complete that task. I mean, that's how the monks do it. They focus on one thing and make sure it's perfect. And they're not half-assing it. Well, they're definitely not half-assing it, but they're not putting, half their heart into something and moving on. And I think that's part of the cycle in terms of, like, people are, oh, chores. But to me, it's kind of the completion of a project. Hey, whether it's small, like, okay, here's some Legos. You can't do anything else until you complete the Lego set. And that means you're not getting any other toys. And that doesn't mean you don't eat, but it means this is what you've tasked to complete this airplane. Let's finish it before we move on to the next. Like, that's what I've been trying to instill in my children. Let's finish one thing before we move on to another.
I love it. And I'm horrible at that because I'll have 10 tabs open, Slack open, the phone, etc. And I literally have a calendar reminder that says deep work, meaning before I start this next task, shut down everything else. And I've had to try to develop these systems and processes to create those deep work states, because the cost is so high of the task switching between the flood of emails and all of the other things that I can't get a 90-minute block of work done. That's focused.
That's why you have to block it out.
And teaching that skill to the kids, like, I don't want to project my own, gaps in skills. I think one of the life skills to teach them is the power of focus.
For sure. I mean, I don't know if you saw this so much in college, but Middlebury, because UNC is so big, but Middlebury is a very small school. I would imagine roughly half the class went to boarding school. And what I noticed with those kids versus the day school kids like myself, 6 o'clock would roll around, they would go to their room, heads down. They would be heads down till 9. And we would be chit-chatting, have coffee, let's get mop sticks, like, let's play some pool, Duke's on, and then it would be 8:45, and then they're all ready to rumble, right? And either you rumble with them and you pay for it for the next month, or you end up missing the fun part because now you realize, okay, wait, I have a paper due in 4 hours. I have a paper due in the morning, but I noticed that discipline, that 3-hour block of time that these kids would be heads down getting their work done because they had to, because they shut the whole lights off. They had to get their work done. And quite frankly, I saw that in my dad with things.
Well, so we're back, and want to kind of, ask you maybe what are some more difficult times in your career that you've had and kind of how you bounce back from it and what you learned from it?
Yeah, I mean, really, in the last 12 months, I've had one of the more difficult times in my career. I'm not just dealing with my mom who had a stroke during COVID, and as an only child, as I mentioned earlier, and she's my best friend. Obviously, that weighs on me. But I too had my own health scare. I have always had high blood pressure, but my blood pressure was off the charts. And I had to seek help, like immediate help, because my cardiologist thought I was having a stroke. And I'm thinking, no, my mom had a stroke. She's 90. I don't have strokes. Like that's for old people. And mine, I'm in my Peloton. I am in relatively decent shape. Yes, I do like an occasional French fry, but I'm not a terrible eater. And mine was stress. I had been pushing myself and grinding to the point where my body said no more. And I had to stop. I literally had to stop. I was forced to stop because my body told me I could end up seriously paralyzed or worse. And I have two young kids that rely on me. I'm their mommy, and I want to see them grow up and flourish. But it was a very big reminder about how things like this, whether it's having a stroke or having high blood pressure that forces you to reevaluate. Like, I was lucky. I realized how lucky I was in that moment because I was able to say, hey, enough. Like, I can't be continuing to work and travel at this pace and be the mom, the wife, the daughter that I want to be. But I actually couldn't even continue on the worker. Like, if someone asked me what my hobbies are, I'd say work. Like, I love to work. I don't mind work. I'm literally, when I'm on my phone, I'm not twiddling on Instagram. I'm actually answering emails. I am working. And so when I had this scare this past year where I felt like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to continue to do anything I like, whether it's work or more importantly, be with my family. It was a wake up call, and it was one that I needed. And I think that's why I was able to kind of reevaluate my goals and priorities in a way that I hadn't before. Every year I sit down, I write my to-do list, I write my goals. I still don't speak French. You know what? I'm never going to speak French most likely at this point. But it was a wake up call for me and what's important and how I want to live the second half of my life. And that is not just going to go. And I was going to go. And I've really taken the page where I want to focus and on one thing at a time. I want to wrap up that task the best of my. Listen, are there days I'm going to be pulled in many different directions? Absolutely. The big tasks I really do want to hone in on and really focus on and do them the best. Because I've also noticed with myself, when I don't do that, I'm my worst enemy. And part of that stress that caused me to had my blood pressure to spike was mainly stress on myself. It wasn't something that people were putting on me. It was me. It was me on me. And it was because I was getting pulled in all these different directions, because I'm intellectually curious, and I would click on these stupid links that would come up in my email box or my LinkedIn. And, oh, do I need to get a master's in Columbia in engineering and artificial intelligence? No, probably not. Did I take the exam to get in? Absolutely. Of course I did. Why not? And and that's 30 minutes I'm never going to get back. But it was an opportunity for me to recognize all the things that my parents did well, and that was focus. Whether it was focused on me, focused on work, focused on family, focused on grilling steaks, and really honing in and doing the best you can in that moment. I have to catch myself, but I am so much better at it now than I was 6 months ago. And I bet you in 6 months, if we talked again, I'd be even better at it.
It's such an interesting observation because I wonder how our personality types need to hit a wall before we reassess. And I haven't had that yet, but my personality type, Jing, is far better than me, is just go, go, go. And we have these different things of our lives with the business, the family, the Ironman and marathon training, the veteran initiatives. And, you get 4 or 5, 6 hours of sleep on a good night. And then, but there's no space. There's not that, you know what? I'm just going to sit and read a book and it's 9 p.m. I don't need to go through YouTube shorts for 30 minutes. Like that space. And what I've noticed actually is now that we've changed our alcohol consumption at home, where we just don't have any alcohol at home. Now it's almost like I'm fidgeting. Like, what do I replace it with? Do I dig for chocolate or ice cream somewhere? Do I look at YouTube? I gotta have to replace this. And I'm learning how to see that there isn't any downtime. I need to create it.
You have to create it. It's not going to create it for you. If anything, you can fill it with other stuff. If you don't literally have those downtime blocks, those let me put my phone in the other room blocks, let me do this, no one's going to do that but you. And, when you talk about all the emails, 90% of the time, if you don't answer an email in 5 minutes after it's being sent, you know what? It's going to be okay.
Yeah. What are your 2024 goals?
Oof. I have a lot, and one you hit was reading more physical books. I realized over the last year I've stopped reading, and even on Kindle or Audible. I really stopped consuming literature, and I think that's a huge negative. And so I have multiple books in flight and I've Kindled them, and I've put them on Audible so I can make sure I can complete them. But really, reading is top of mind. I think it's super relaxing, and I did start doing that over a holiday. Working out more, but primarily within working out, I used to run marathons until I got injured because of this go, go, go mentality. I'm really starting, and this is going to really date me, stretching and making sure, because I do think stretching is so important as you get older because you get tighter. But I also think it helps to release stress. And so I've been trying to stretch, do yoga, do more breath work, meditate, which I'm terrible at. Meditate's its own line item that I really think is a powerful way to get to this focus. But the big things, these are, as you can tell, aren't like, I'm going to make $30 million and I'm going to do this. I really want to focus on myself and being clear of mind. And I think that's really different from my previous goals, and which were, I'm going to become fluent in French. I'm going to perfect my Spanish. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to, run a marathon. I'm going to do this. And those are great goals, and I admire them. But if you're a mother and you work and you have this and that, and you want to be involved with philanthropy, and I, like you, trying to support the veterans, can't do it all. But I can't do it all. I'm not healthy and I'm not strong. And all of that at the end of the day, and what's the most important thing is I want to be there for my family. And so all of those things, whether it's reading, whether it's going to more art museums, to go back to that slower pace, is all so I can be a better mother and a better wife, a better daughter. Those are really, to me, those are my goals. Like, if I can come out the year and making sure my kids think I'm more present, and it's baby steps for me because I am addicted to the phone and the laptops and all that stuff. I carry Jordan, you've never seen me without my iPad. It's like, It's glued to me. I brought it to the Knicks game. Like, it's bananas. But I'm getting better, and the only way I can be better is being more present and for my family. And that's my goal. And I'm keeping it simple. I'm not making it overly complicated as I've done in the past. And so we'll see. We'll see. We'll check in. We're checking. I give myself a 49. today.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a episode where we've covered a fair amount of topics.
Yes,
We didn't
as
talk anything
always.
about the business.
Yeah,
It's
but
fine. I think this is a more
next time,
interesting
next
angle.
time.
Well, appreciate you taking the time for this. And I'm glad that we had a chance to explore all these topics together.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jordan. I appreciate it.